This is the podcast between an old school mentor and a digital mentee on managing and/or working with people, navigating a career, growing profits, and not killing your coworkers along the way. Now let's join the consultant, Hayden Shaw, and the millennial who fixes Hayden's iPhone, Seth Tower Hurd.
Consultant and the millennial. This is really a part 2 to the last episode on why teams get stuck. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and start there. And I'm going to do a quick recap. There's multiple stages teams go through. Form, storm, which is, bumping up against each other, being frustrated. Norm, where we figure out how to work with each other. And then perform, where you actually hit the ball out of the park, you make money, you get the thank you from the bosses above you because you guys did a really good job. The problem is that most people don't get to perform if they get stuck in the storming. They never norm out and they never normalize, and they just get stuck with storming, right? They just get stuck in conflict. I had asked on the last episode about sub teams. And what do you do there? Because, that one really shut me up. I'm like, oh, man, I have seen that so many times. So that's actually where we're going to start this episode, is you're saying sub-teams aren't bad. And I also want you to talk about real quick, teams of more than 14 people or something like that, which we'd also mentioned.
Gotcha. All right. Let me do the teams of 14 people first. More than 14 people. The research is pretty clear. When you get over 7 people, you don't have a team, you have a convention.
Okay.
And you go from small group dynamics to mid-sized group dynamics. 40 is the magic number for large group dynamics. So, and here's a little math that explains it. Anytime there's people involved, so there's you and me, and there's one-on-one conversation. When we have a guest, and I screwed up the episode when we recorded with a woman who is an expert on interpreting body language.
Yeah,
we got to record with her again because she was great.
We'll get her back. Yeah.
When there are 3 of us, it goes 3 times 3. There are 9 different communication channels that have to run. When there are 4 of us on the team, 4 times 4 is
16.
When there are 12 of us on the team, we go to 144. And because I'm on the people side, not the math side of business, I chose 12 instead of 14 because I have no idea what 14 times 14 is, Seth. And so suddenly we got a lot of things to juggle. And because we have so many communication channels to work with, it takes significantly more time to manage communication than it does in a group under 12, than it does in a group under 7. 7 is the magic number for where everybody gets to talk in a 30 to 60-minute meeting and have their say, and then go back around again. Because when you think about it, how do you get everybody involved in an issue? Everybody engaged? Everybody, the idea, the issue is brought out. Everybody talks about it. People say, oh, that's a great idea, or I disagree, or what about this? Then everybody talks about it again. And then people say, well, I disagree. What about this? I don't know about that. I just had a better idea. And we talk about that again. When people feel like something got done, they feel like everybody involved had their say. We were able to analyze it. People felt free to talk openly, and then we made a decision. That's what getting things done in a team or in a meeting means. It is such a delicate process. It can go awry at so many spots. And one of the best ones that goes awry on is you've got 12 people in a meeting, 14 people in a meeting. You can put out a problem or an opportunity. You can hear from half. You can get objections from the more talkative or the more passionate. Everybody else has to sit quietly, and then they do their talking after the meeting. So you think you got something done in that meeting. What you got done was a provisional agreement because not everybody was heard from, and everybody then has to go back and process it because they didn't have processing time in the meeting. And then they go back and process it. And then 2 meetings later, they bring the topic back up again and want to have their say. And 14 is too many now. And half the group thought the decision was made when it was never made. And that's why large teams go very slowly, because they process over 2 months period of time. And some of the team has already announced to their team the decision that was never really made, because it was a draft conversation. It was provisional only. And then they go back to their team and announce it, and the organization feels like we can never get anything done. We never make a decision. It's because our teams are too big.
You know, I think about the times I've been frustrated and I look a couple of rungs up the ladder and, you know, I see meetings of 30 people, that all of a sudden it's like,
welcome to hell, as they would say on the old B movie channels.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it gets to be, managers plus admins, and there's more people in there asking questions, et cetera, et cetera. So pretty much we shouldn't have a team meeting over 7 almost ever. And if it's got to be bigger than that, it's a large group dynamic. And how do you run that?
You don't.
You just don't.
You don't. What you do is have people come in as subject matter experts and consultants. I think one of the most interesting and effective developments in meeting and project management, the actual people side of it, is in something called Scrum. And so organizations will bring in a Scrum experts to teach them Scrum when they're on a critical project that's not getting done. And Scrum forces organizations with bad processes or bad dynamics to get disciplined despite their dynamics. And they'll just throw off sparks everywhere because they don't get along well. And Scrum forces them to do work even with people they don't like or get along well with. Or if they're a really nice culture, and a lot of nonprofits have really nice cultures, for example, and they don't get anything done because people are too nice, Scrum forces them to do that. And what Scrum does is said, who are the critical people for this project? We don't need any more people than what are critical to get it done. And then we have alternate, we have subject matter experts, and when that person who was critical is no longer critical, they go from the critical list onto the as needed list, and you call them in as consultants or subject matter experts, but they're not in the meeting when they're not critical.
There we go. That's the opposite of what I've been around virtually my whole career. It's like, well, blah, blah, blah is going to feel upset if they don't get a seat at the table. And so there are more seats at the table. Yeah.
Boom. You just said it. So when a smaller organization gets bigger, or a people-oriented organization with some very strong people values scales, they scale up how many people are in a meeting so nobody feels disinvited. Everybody complains. Everybody for years has said in the sessions I lead, meetings, we're dying in meetings. Well, great. I'm going to tell your leaders to uninvite you. Oh, no, don't do that. I don't want to be in this many meetings, but I also don't want to have a say of something that affects me or my people. I want to be able to stop whatever's dumb that affects my team.
Which are both valid things to want. Absolutely.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. You just messed up what I was going to say, because I was going to say you can't have both. But you're right. Life is full of valid things to want, but you can have both. So you have to manage the reality of the fact both of those are valid. And most organizations, as they get bigger, don't get bigger enough. They don't scale the way they make decisions and the way they handle teams and the way they handle projects. In order to be truly bigger, they get stuck in what we called in the last episode a purgatory of we're too big to get anything done, but we're not big enough. But we don't have the systems that have scaled with us, the communication systems, to actually allow us to grow. In a lot of nonprofits, especially, but in many, many smaller companies that got bigger, you're successful enough to screw it up in the way you do meetings and make decisions, because both are valid, Seth. I need to protect against bad decisions that are going to mess us up, but I'm in too many meetings. And so in a lot of smaller companies, they're in meetings all day long and can't get any work done, and they're too small to have high-paid people and not getting work done.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to like the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence thing, because one of the things I've really had to own is everything that's good about the company at this point really is me. And everything that's bad about the company is me. And when you go out and you're a founder and you start a business,
that's tweetable right
your
there.
Own strengths and weaknesses get multiplied to where you can't ignore them, because the effects of your decisions are so right in front of you. I think about the companies that I've been with because everybody wants to say, like, so that's great right now. It's like, oh, well, if we just had more people and more money, we'd win. Not necessarily. Maybe you'd lose. Small companies crush big companies all the flipping time right now. Think about how many big box stores are closing down. I just did an episode of Neighbors Again, which is the kind of current events and politics podcast I do, with a guest who lives near a mall that is now literally full of weed. A pharmaceutical company that sells CBD oil bought it, and Sears and Macy's and all that. It's just rows and rows and rows of weed. Okay, so the idea that just being bigger is going to make you win is not true.
It really is. Now, Sears was wonderful because we went from manufacturing. We became a manufacturing company. It's allowed us to win 2 world wars. It allowed us to build the greatest nation, and we didn't have the same resistance to changes. People said, we don't have enough labor force. Manufacturing's great. And we need more. We need more mechanization. We need more machines. We need more of that because we just didn't have the labor for it. And educational systems train people for the future rather than the past in the United States compared to Europe. And Europe had the technology. They just couldn't get the labor force to mechanize because it took skilled jobs away from craftsmen. And so suddenly you've got this thing where Sears is now selling all these mass-produced products to all these people and all these farms, and it was an innovation. And the whole department store model truly got its last nailed in it when the internet came along and you could find exactly what you want and price shop it. Yeah. You didn't have one place to get everything. And so the model didn't work. It should have been broken off. I saw Home Depot, craftsman buyers, welcome home. And so Home Depot's putting up signs welcoming people who can't, who used to be loyal craftsman Sears tools buyers. Anyway, what do you do with a team of 14? To go back to your question, let me summarize. You don't have a team of 14. You have a team of 7, and you interchange people. And at first, they won't like it. And at first, you'll be really bad at informing them about what you decide to do because most of us only know how to work out tough decisions with all the people in the room. We don't know how to come up with a preliminary draft of a decision, send it out to people, let them comment on it as experts, and bring it back in.
Okay. So we actually need to send this out on paper, well, not on paper, but as a document.
Yeah, on paper, on a podcast summary, and then have it transcribed. Or we sit down individually with all those other people in a really small organization and kind of fill them in on what was decided and why. And then we have them write up their response, so we're not misrepresenting it. And then they can object to things, because they are consultants and advisors and experts on their department on what their people think or on a particular subject matter expertise. Now, listen, be carefully. Did you hear that? They're experts on their department and what their people think. And you need to know that before you roll a decision out, even if it's the right decision. Sears should have broke up into a bunch of different pieces. Instead, they bought Kmart so they could go down faster.
In retrospect, that is hilarious.
Right. But, I mean, how many people would have been furious about that decision? And so a lot of decisions, you got to know how people are going to roll with it to make a good decision. And so you can't make change happen that way. You can't make a decision that way. The troops mutiny. And in a small business, the troops don't get in your face. They just don't work as hard, and you lose money. And so we have to work out that process. And by the way, I know it's going to sound like a pitch, but that's what I help organizations do. I go in when their team is stuck. I go in, I interview the people. You know, I've got some experience gauging where a team is at fairly quickly. And then I can give you one of the consultant tips. If we have time before we're done, you listen to the humor. Humor tells you very quickly what stage your team is in. But anyway, you figure out where the team is at. You go interview people, and almost always they tell you what has to happen to solve it, because almost always the team knows what it needs to do. They just don't know how to talk about it with each other without making it worse. And they blame each other for who's not able to handle the truth. You can't handle the truth. And then half the time it's like, well, they can't handle the truth. Well, they can't handle the truth. And so they need some help from the outside to go, you all think you can handle the truth. Here's what you told me. Well, let's put it out on the table, and I'll referee when you begin to get into parent behavior or child behavior, like we talked about at the end of the last podcast. When it gets out of adult conversations, you got somebody here who will make it safe enough to get you through this really hard time. And you ready for this, Seth? good teams can compress their storming from 6 months to 3 weeks and go back to making money if they'll move into norming faster.
Okay. Let me point out a couple things there about what's been demonized, right? So there was this big trend in the last 5 years towards like holacracy or flat organizations where they're like no bosses and we all just do things. And I think Zappos went to it and they lost a bunch of very good higher level executives because of it. And it was very trendy. And at the time I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And, very, I don't know, tech 2.0, millennial-y, Facebook type organization, right? And so, bosses get demonized and consultants get demonized. And the thing is, when you take those things away, you actually just have Mad Max beyond Thunderdome. That's
you often do. And even The Economist, in one of their things on what it costs to run a business, said, let's say you give 7% of your revenue every year to consultants. And, and so they just mentioned it. Everybody hits expertise problems. I hire consultants from my own side business because I don't know what to do in spots and I don't want to take the time to learn.
Yeah.
And, but the thing is, why don't people pull the trigger? You give them a contract, and you know this, Seth, you give them a contract and then they sit on it. This is what I need to do. This is what we need to do. I don't know if the work it's going to take me and if this consultant really knows what they're doing. And somebody once said, of course people will buy if they believe that you can actually solve their problem and make them $5 to every one they spend. Of course people would buy. At the heart of it, they don't believe that the problem will get better. They just believe they'll spend money. They don't believe in you, or they don't believe in them, or they don't believe in their people. And we've all had snake oil salesmen, and we've all run into people who are pretty good consultants. It's just they couldn't turn the wrench on that one. And so, to be fair to folks, I understand what they're worried about. But I'll tell you what, there is nothing worse than what we talked about in the last episode than a team gets stuck at storming, and nobody's willing to bring up what needs to be said in an adult way. And so, let's talk about 3 or 4 ways to do that. Literally, if you haven't listened to the last podcast,
okay,
you probably need to. But let's.
And then I have 2 elements I want to hit before we wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's do that. No, you do that, and then we'll do the 2 elements I want to hit, and we'll wrap up.
How do you do this as an adult? Well, I gave you an example of a word track in the last podcast. Let me rephrase it, and let's give you 3 or 4 more. Why do you have to be an adult? Because we tend to be a child. Oh, I can't believe the team leader is so bad. I can't believe. And then we go to lunch with other people who get into child mode. I cannot believe it's so bad. We're victims of this bad project, bad team, bad company, bad expectations. It's just, we are marvelous, sparkly people. We all act like snowflakes. I know sometimes younger millennials get called snowflakes, and you've joked about that in past episodes, Seth, but we all act like snowflakes when we're in child mode. I just so sad. Or with them, we go into parent mode. Let me tell you exactly what this team ought to be doing, and our team leader sucks, or our boss sucks if the boss is in charge of the team, and here's this, blah, blah. And then we ricochet back between I'm a parent who knows everything, and I'm a child who's a victim of all of it. And then we have a meeting where we say, I may not make any friends with this, and we all know something bad is going to come when somebody starts with that. But I just get so frustrated in these meetings because it just seems like we talk and talk and talk, but we just start disagreeing more and more. I don't really know how we're going to overcome these disagreements. You 3 want to go this direction, and I and these 3 want to go this direction, and you 3 never talk. I just think we're stuck and we're going nowhere. I know I'm probably going to make some people mad and hurt some feelings, but
mm-hmm.
And then everybody in the room goes, why did you do that? Why did you bring it up? And then the storming begins and we can no longer avoid it. As I said in the last podcast, you cannot wait until it boils over, or we can't stay out of parent or child mode. We're too emotionally consumed by it. You got to do it earlier on before it boils over. And so here's 3 other ways you can do it. Hey, and listen to the past podcast. You've already talked to the individuals on the side. Listen to the past podcast. You've already talked to the individuals. You've already been mature about it. And you say, hey, I know I've had some conversations with people, and I know some people feel this way and others are not as sure we can handle it as a group. They're like, what are you going to do, man? But I don't see how we can make this work without handling it as a group. I just see us as two subdivided. We're just basically two teams that come together and coordinate. People go to lunch with other folks and don't invite each other so they can talk about what goes on in these meetings. I just think we need to quit talking on the side, and we need to talk. It's got to be okay for us to say what we really think, even if the answer is, I don't know what to do about it, or this team's we're never going to get there. I mean, we're already 4 weeks behind, and we're only 3 months into this project. The math on this is impossible. I know some of you are like, dude, I would be dead in my culture if I did that. And I want to acknowledge that for some of you, you probably would be. And I'm sorry if that's the case.
Okay, so the two things I want to hit before we wrap, and then I got to eat some lunch. Number one is dealing with what I would call legacy employees that have been like, well, I've been here for 15 years, so therefore, this is the way we do things. And then the second thing is scaling your organization and or a reorg, which it seems like when you get a new CEO or whatever, everybody loves to do the reorg where everybody gets a new job title and we rearrange teams and stuff like that. How important it is to get those down to like 7 and not have meetings bigger than that, because people hate, it's one of those things. It was like a stereotype in the office, like the assistant to the regional manager, assistant regional manager. The reason we have assistant regional managers and all these, mid-level tiers is because you really can only manage and give feedback to, I would say maybe you probably, if you break it down like the military, like maybe 7 or 10 people, you can manage and actually know what the heck they're doing. Or if they're just sitting there, playing a cell phone game the whole time for 40 hours a week, right? So actually, it does seem like in a lot of cases, more mid-level management and then running, really tight ship is what will get you back to profitability.
I couldn't agree more. 28-year-old millennial that I coach said to me, how could they be allowed? How could they still be working if they're performing that badly? Well, it's just that their span of control was too great. There wasn't anybody who was able to pay attention to it, and it was never a big enough priority because the leader had too many people they were in charge of, so they couldn't keep eyeballs on everything. Every organization I've known that got too big and then began to get those second in commands.
Yep.
Discover all these problems they didn't know were there, and it's because they were never big enough problems to be as big as the other problems they had to deal with. But when you get a legitimate span of control, you're like, well, 5 of these departments don't work. Everybody's like, what has gone wrong here? Oh, you just never saw it. You were never close enough to it to see it. So Seth, it's a scalability problem. No, it's not bad. It's always been that bad. You just didn't know it was that bad because the problems you were dealing with were bigger. And two more examples and we'll wrap it up, because I know people are like, well, we're covering a lot of the same thing we did in the last one. Let me give you 2 more of what you do. Hey, I work in an organization where they'd never allow me to get by with this. Well, then you got to go soft and slowly, not passive aggressively, because you always stay in adult mode. You never get into child mode. I want you to know it's just so bad, blah, blah, blah. You never get into that. You begin to drop hints. And Seth, so funny, you had said, let's do one episode on stages teams go through, and let's do another one on stages and change. Well, that's actually what we're talking about, is how do you deal with change in this episode far more. And so when you're trying to run a change process with some of the icky dynamics with the team that's stuck, and you go, this meeting, I'm just going to bring up a fact. Hey, we're behind on our timetable. I'm just worried. You don't comment. You don't give an explanation. You don't even give an answer, because that'd come across as, oh, wow, you're being critical again, Hayden. You just say, I'm just really concerned about the fact we're behind. And what everybody else on the team wants to do is pretend that we're not behind, so we don't have to deal with anything that's causing us to be behind. They just want the pot to keep gurgling and churning. And you just bring up little facts and shut up. And then, wow, what's the agenda for this meeting? And you just say that in a meeting where there hasn't been an agenda for the last 20 meetings. What's on the agenda for this meeting? You say it with a smile. You say it as an adult. You don't say it as a parent. What's on the agenda for this meeting? Ha, 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 ha. And that's a sarcastic, storming, gross, parent, icky, dysfunctional behavior. You say, hey, what's on the agenda today? And people are like, then you say, well, wow, we've been talking on this first topic for a long time. That's all you do is make factual descriptions. You talk to everyone on the team on the side about the facts.
He's Hayden Shaw. This is the Consultant Millennial. If you're in this right now, if you've got teams that are too big and you need somebody to help get the emotion out as you, as a leader of a department or a division, get this thing rearranged, peopledrivenresults.com. You can get in touch with them there. And if you don't want to lose your star employees along the way, Hayden is phenomenal at employee retention, particularly when it comes to generational turnover, when the generations are not getting along, which if you reorg and you put people together who have never been together before, I promise you your baby boomers and your millennials are going to clash, because that has definitely happened. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. I run a company called Digital Profit Farm. We do websites that actually make money, social media management that actually makes money, and podcasting that actually gets listened to. You can check out more about what I do at digitalprofitfarm.com, and we will see you next Friday.